Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Philosophical Weightlifting Podcast. Very quickly, I just wanted to let you know that part 2 of the Jilly Jaworske podcast quickly turned into part 2 and 3. The recording of the second segment ended up taking 2 hours, and because of this, it will be broken up and part 3 will be released next Saturday. You will not want to miss it. Jilly goes off during that episode with a rant for the ages. Thanks again for tuning into the podcast. Now let's get on to part 2 of the interview with American weightlifter and coach Jilly Jaworske. What's going on, guys? Joshua Gibson here with another episode of the Philosophical Weightlifting Podcast. This is part 2 of the Jilly Jaworske podcast. It's taking place about a week after or 2 weeks after the first one. Sorry, I lose track of time so easily. So it's episode 30. We had really good feedback from the first one. So I'm excited to have her on again and to talk about what's been going on. So you had a shoulder injury that you kind of told us about the first time through. So I'd like you to kind of dive into that, like maybe the actual surgery, the recovery, and then we'll kind of go from there.
So I had surgery about 2 weeks ago. I went in with the understanding that they were going to basically shave off the end of one of my clavicles. So it's something that is hereditary, like as far as I know. My clavicles are just a little bit long on each side. My right one is actually it was really long. And so what was happening was it was rubbing against my humerus. So for, most of my weightlifting career, what I've experienced is kind of like this, like rolled forward short shoulder position on the right side. And multiple times, like over the years, I've been called for shoulder instability. It was funny, like AO, they overturned one of my, actually 2 of my clean and jerks for shoulder instability. It was like a soft press from the shoulder. It's normally not my elbow, although it has shown up in my elbow because I've also broken this arm. I broke it last year. The right shoulder has been problematic really due to what's been going on inside my shoulder. And like I said, you can get MRIs. I've had them with contrast. I've had them without contrast. We've compared them. It doesn't really give you the whole picture, but we knew that there was a cyst in my shoulder. We believed it was from the rubbing, basically, of the clavicle and the humerus. What we did not realize was that I also had a pretty sizable tear in my labrum, the front of my labrum, so the anterior side, as well as some instability in the back, in my posterior labrum. So I went into surgery with the understanding that I would be out for about 6 to 8 weeks before I could start really any kind of like overhead movement with like dumbbells, barbell, definitely not like snatching or clean and jerking, but it was looking like about 2 months of recovery, maybe a little less than that. I woke up from surgery and they told me it was going to be like 4 to 6 months before I could even put a barbell over my head. So, due to the severity of it, of the tear, of like they took about a centimeter off my clavicle, the anchors, like that whole process, and then like cleaning out all that gunk. Like I actually have pictures of the cyst, and it's really gross. Like they took pictures of everything so that I could actually like see the tears and like where they put in the anchors. It was way worse than we thought. So it's funny because, I've been lifting on this. Really, I've known about it for the past 3 years. It's been getting progressively worse. Going into the surgery, I knew it was bad because my prep leading up to the Arnold was kind of like the last straw. I had a really, really kind of rough couple of weeks of training leading up to it where I could not even really put a bar in my front rack. I jerked from the front rack approximately 1 time in the month leading up to the Arnold, which is why my clean and jerks were all over the place. I actually switched my grip the week of the Arnold to try and accommodate what was going on because it was at a point where I really couldn't move comfortably overhead whatsoever. So it was something 3 years ago we started investigating this. We kept an eye on it. I was getting cortisone injections at one point every 2 months in both shoulders because the left one started acting up as the right one continued to deteriorate. And after a while, it's just there's only so much cortisone you can do before it really starts causing permanent damage. And I wasn't getting any relief from it. So here we are about 2 weeks later, and I still can't drive. I'm still in a sling. I start physical therapy next week. I've been able to take off the sling finally to like bathe and dress myself. But like the first week, it was a complete no-go. Like I was helpless, like could not cook, was on a number of like painkillers and sedatives just because they wanted me basically to stay still, lie in bed, not really move around. So today is actually my first day back at work. And so I'm going in and I'm, kind of nervous. Like it's mentally too, like as an athlete, like going through something like this. And then, I have all these athletes who are like preparing for AO3 and like with goals with AO finals. Like I'm out, like I'm out for a while. So I'm working on like getting myself mentally prepared to go in for our heavy Friday today and bring energy. That's where I'm at right now. Cause like last week there was no energy.
Right.
And before that, I was like in surgery for a few hours. So, it's funny. All my athletes have actually been coming to my house because I can't go anywhere. Like I am helpless. Like they're coming over, like bringing me like things and training in my garage right now, like checking in on me because they know like where I am. We build this new gym and here I am like stuck at home and they're literally training on my 2 platforms in the garage with like my oldest weights. And, it's funny. Like it's been an interesting journey the last couple of weeks.
So one question I have is, knowing that this injury was like so extensive, what was it like training on it up to this point? Like, could you kind of describe maybe a few of the sessions where like how it impacted your performance? Because you were still able to put up really good numbers. Like that's very surprising.
Well, if you've kind of been like tracking some of the numbers I've been doing over the last year, which again, some people track and some people don't. They were actually like, I was actually super disappointed with how things have been going. Last summer I put up a 218 total, as a slightly heavy 75. So I went 98, 120, which was like best day of my life. I was able to keep a lot of muscle mass on. And the truth of the matter is that spring I had actually found out my arm was broken. So let's see, AO 2016, this is actually kind of a funny story. My radius was actually fractured and I knew that something was wrong because I had subluxed it in training. I continued to lift on it for 2 months. So this is one of those things too, like certain athletes just have like kind of a crazy pain tolerance in their bricks. Like Catalyst wrote an article on this a long time ago. Like, are you a brick or a Twinkie? I'm a brick. So, it was something where I told my coach at the time, which is not my current coach, hey, my arm's really bothering me. I told him I subluxed it like shortly before AO. I was like, I can't get the swelling to go down. I'm icing. I've done heat. I've done therapy. I've done sauna. I made my openers at AO 2016. It was like 78.95 or something. It was very bad. It was a bad day, right? And then we come back around and I go get an x-ray and they see a shadow and then I get an MRI and they're like, yeah, your radius is like fractured, like 4 centimeters, like through the center. So like my arm was broken. So like there was really like lockout wasn't happening. Like nothing was happening. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I was like, I'm working my butt off because like summer 2016, I had a great summer and was snatching just under 90 and clean and jerking like just over, like almost 110, like in that 105, 108 range. And then all of a sudden my, list took a huge hit. And, then we found out it was the arm. So I was in a cast for 6 weeks and that was nationals in 2017. And I was just like eating a lot because I just was sad. Honestly, that's the truth. I got like fat and I was going to the gym and leg pressing, lunges, doing like single armed work. And I just got huge. Like I'm a 69 who sits at 69 and I got up to 77. And if you gain that much weight, like, yeah, I got fat, but I also got a lot stronger, and really focused on accessory work. So like that summer when I got out of my cast and actually got into like a good training program, all of a sudden it was like snatches were like 92, 94, 96, 98, which was, I got under 100 actually at 72. And on the way up, I dropped it. So it was like one of those meets where I was like super frustrated with myself, but like snatches were going great. And being heavier, my shoulders weren't bothering me as much. Clean and jerks, same thing. The more weight I had on those shoulders, my training felt really good. Honestly, because I had more fat, to protect what was going on. Yes, my jerks were still forward. Yes, all my jerks always felt forward. Like, it was one of those things with my coach. Like, he's like, your jerks are forward. Your jerks are forward. Like, you need to, externally rotate more. And then we abandoned that entirely. He's like, I just want you to catch neutral, kind of like Yuri Vardanian. He's like, I just want you to catch like neutral, like short step, get under. Like, we just need like a clean lockout, right? And I would try, and from behind the neck, I actually could get it a lot of the time, but going from a front rack, it was like a no-go. So it got to this point where like some weeks I could jerk fantastic, and then if we hit it really hard, the following week I couldn't jerk at all. And it was like this back and forth where like snatch, because of the wider grip, I could get away with it. But when that shoulder started rotating forwards in training, we started to see a lot of that like slight press up from the shoulder. And of course, they're going to call that. But the unfortunate part is that I really didn't have control over it at maximal weight, right? And like, we don't go into meets and lift sub-maximally. Like, I'm opening at like 92% most of the time or higher. So it was very frustrating, like, to make 2 for 6 lifts after you worked your ass off. It's like, why am I doing this? Like, I've missed medals at this point by like 2 kilos, like 2 meets in a row. And you're just like, damn. So, and some of them were just because of bad calls or calls that, like I said, I've had lifts overturned. Like at AO, I made 111, but of course, like, it's overturned. I made 106, but it was overturned. It was just like that frustrating moment in the back where you're like, excuse me, fuck. You're just like, what do I have to do? I'm already training 6 days a week. I already, I'm doing all this accessory work. I've dedicated my life. I'm showed up. I made weight. I'm on my A game. I tried competing heavier. You know what I mean? For a little while, I was floating up in the 90 category. And that's when I really started, like I said, I was just over 75. I really started putting up bigger numbers. And then I decided that we needed to open a gym. And like, this is kind of where things went downhill. And like, this is like the reality of being a lifter in this sport. There's kind of like this like limbo where you're not on a world's team and you're not on a Pan Am's team. And you're also not just sneaking into nationals. Okay. Like, you're right there. And those are the people who usually have to work full time, whether it's from home, whether it's running a gym, whether it's being a full-time student, like whatever it is, a graduate assistant, like, you are doing something else full time while trying to lift full time. And Colin will tell you time and time again, you have to eliminate. Like, Colin will tell you, I'm a workaholic. Like, I'll go out to his house for a week and he'll, he has this joke. He does like the Ronin recovery system, which is like where he trains really hard for like 2 to 3 hours and he totally chills. And I like totally like watches TV in the recliner, like Ronin recovery system, right? Might work on the computer here or there a little bit. Like, I get done with training and I'm on my laptop, I'm on my cell phone, I'm like calling people, I'm emailing people. And it's like, even though I'm not even at my gym, it's like work. And that's not really conducive to training really well. Mm-hmm. At least drug free. And so that's just the reality of it. Sorry, my roommate just walked in. And, so as we're starting to come up with this idea, right, that we want to open a gym, as the team grew, now we're fall 2017, my weight starts to go down a lot. Some people, when they're really stressed, they gain weight. When I'm really happy, I gain weight. Kind of like when I was just getting fat and happy and doing accessory work, I dropped like almost 20 pounds. At my lightest, I got back down to 65 kilos.
Wow.
So it was it really killed my lifting. And I was still putting up good numbers, right? Like, I did like 90, 106 or something at AO. And then I did, which Arnold was very frustrating, but I did like 87, 104. Not like fantastic numbers, but still decent. It was managing all of the things at once. And with that, as I dropped weight, suddenly there's no extra padding because I lean out. My upper body leans out first. There was no extra padding on my shoulders. And me being the stubborn ass I am, I really didn't drop my training numbers until my shoulders were screaming. So I was still working off my numbers. We all do this, right? Like, we don't know when to adjust our numbers. Like, what numbers do I work off of, right? I was still working off of 98, 120, weighing like 69, 70 kilos, and I hit those numbers weighing 77. And Colin was like, Jilly, you've lost like 10% of your body weight. We have to drop your numbers. But at this point, it was almost too late. Like, I was so beat up, like trying to continue to work off those numbers and hit those numbers. I hit like a 200 total 2 weeks before the Arnold, and I was disappointed with myself, you know, like I was like bummed. And he's like, you've lost 10% of your body weight. Like, of course your total is going to go down. Like, this is what happens when we don't manage stress. So training was like me fitting it in. Like, I would put myself on a timer and I would work for like 60 to 90 minutes. And that was seriously how I did training. And like, sometimes I would finish everything really well. And sometimes I would just barely finish. And I knew it wasn't like my best quality training. But knowing that, like I said, we needed to start to move in a direction to open the gym. We took 10 people to the Arnold. Like, there were a lot of things going on, like, other than my own training. I was getting ready to move into a house. So I'm like looking for gym spaces during this prep. I'm looking for houses during this prep. I'm still coaching. I'm still training. We're still managing the business. It was not like good training. It was not comfortable training. Like, I, went out to see Colin and Court in February and actually had, when I go out there, that's my best training. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And if you can find that kind of environment where you can step back for a week, you'll find that you do train really well. You know what I mean? Because you're not doing all these other things. You're not running to the store, running around with the dogs, running to the gym, talking with 16 different clients. It's way more focused. It almost, feels like a training camp, even though it's not. It's that intention. So during one of those sessions, and like I said, it was really focused training. I felt like the last big cyst rupture in my shoulder, and it was a Thursday, and we were just front squatting, and I unracked 120, and it was a heavy weight, but it wasn't a really heavy weight. And I went down on the first one and stood up, and I was like blinded by pain. And Colin was like, get down and finish your freaking triple. You know what I mean? It was like one of those things where like, I don't remember finishing it. Like, I ground it out and I stood up, and that was the last day I front squatted. Honest to God. Like, I haven't front squatted since, because I just looked at him and he looked at my shoulder and he's like, why is your arm swelling? No, like, seriously. He's like, why is it swelling? Like, what's going on? And I was like, dude, I don't know. I'm like, my shoulder feels really funky. And we had snatches the next day, and I did fine. Like, I hit, I don't know, like 90 or 92 or nothing like crazy, but it was consistent, right? And I think I clean and jerked 104. I think I did it like 4 times or something like that. And so I was feeling like pretty good. It was like a good 90% day. But I went back in the house, and I mean, my whole right arm was like swollen and hot. And I was just icing it. And then I did the heating pad, and I got up on Saturday and I did some back squats, and I got on the plane and I was like, all right, this isn't good. Like, this is like, it's been a while since it's been this bad. Like, my arm hadn't been that swollen since I broke it. And my shoulder hadn't been that swollen since I broke it. So then, we're like 5 or 6 weeks out from the Arnold. It was all about managing pain at that point. I back squatted like as much as I could. I basically did safety bar squats to make up for front squats, and those suck. Those were not particularly comfortable, but I did them. I snatched a lot. I did a lot of snatches, a lot of light snatches, and then like one day of heavy snatching. Cause like I normally do train 6 days a week, like when I'm in full training. I clean and jerked like once a week and did behind the neck jerks once a week, because any kind of pressure for the front rack, or really even, it got to the point where even putting pressure on like my traps or re-racking jerks, because I like to re-rack jerks. Like, re-racking jerks is something that I program a lot of the time. It's really great to work that eccentric movement if you struggle with jerks like I do. That was the biggest change in my jerks, was that we started doing more re-racks, right? I couldn't do any re-racks. Like, it was so tender that every time I'd bring that thing down, it would hit that, basically that spot, whether it was behind the neck or in front, because like I said, they did both sides. And I just was like, fuck, I have to drop it, Colin. Like, I'm sorry. Like, it has to go on the blocks. So basically I felt like a giant baby going into the Arnold, because I was like, damn, like this sucks. And I was still weighing right around 69, a little bit over. Definitely wasn't as heavy as I was sitting going into the American Open. And I just couldn't keep weight on. Like after the Arnold, I texted Colin at one point and I was like, I weigh 65 kilos. And he's like, Jilly, that is way too light. He's like, that's way too light. Cause I'm just not competitive there. Like my body doesn't really feel strong at 65 kilos. Even though I started as like a 58, 63, I've learned that like over the years, I am much more happy, competitive, consistent, like in that 69, 75 range, really 75. So yeah, I mean, like I knew it was bad. I got to like, I didn't even want to get imaging. I have a really good relationship with my ortho because he's looked at this shoulder and we've MRI'd it at least 4 times now over the past 3 years. And I was like, Matt, it's bad. Like I just texted him like the day after the Arnold, because I had a long talk with Colin about basically becoming more serious about weightlifting, if you can imagine, because, you know, it's like putting your priorities in order. I told him I needed to get this fixed. I was like, I'm telling you, something's wrong. Like it was one of those things. I was like, I feel like it's affecting me mentally because I'm not as confident with catching a clean. I'm not as confident pulling a bar. I'm not as confident really, you know, like pressing into a snatch in the catch. Like I feel like something is really off. He's like, if you have that mentality, you're not going to be competitive. He's like, you have to really love training, get back to loving training. And I was like, right now, I can't even think about training. Like my body is killing me. And so, yeah, I should have probably just, you know, eaten a lot of food and gained weight, but instead we just continued to open a gym. And so that didn't happen, and just continued on like, you know, me just working. And so when I went under and I woke up and they told me how bad it was, in a weird way, I kind of knew it was that bad. But, and again, I'm thinking, here I am. I'm like, I'm a baby. It can't be that bad. I'm just making it up, right? Like the imaging isn't showing like some huge labrum tear. It's not showing like some catastrophic injury, right? Like I didn't fall on it. I didn't have like any one incident that caused this. This is just from years and years and years of training. Now I have dislocated this shoulder, but I did it 10 years ago. I got dragged through a fence by a horse. I got like caught up in the reins and I was like a kid. I was like 14. So when you're 14, you just pop it back in and you get back on and it's whatever. Right. And I broke, you know, this arm, but in my head, I'm thinking like, it can't be that, you know what I mean? That was forever ago, or it can't be, you know, this elbow. It was the collective, injuries, the collective training, like the collective volume on a really unhealthy shoulder. And I did all my accessory work, right? I followed instructions. I've been through physical therapy to rehab this shoulder. I did physical therapy for a year, like the very first year. We're talking about like a 3-year plan here where they didn't want to go in and do surgery when I was 23 or 22. You know, they said I was too young. They said that this is the surgery they normally do in like elderly populations. This was like a last ditch effort. This was, you know, I am not getting younger and I still want a shot at being competitive. So I need to fix this because I'll be damned if I get called on one more press out.
Sure.
Because I was just over it. Like I left AO frustrated because I knew, unlike the Arnold, right? Where like I knew my training was shit. I knew up to AO that I'd given everything, like absolutely everything to my training. And I was devastated, like getting called, especially on that last clean and jerk where, I mean, it was like hard because I was so frustrated. And then Colin was like, that was good. And they were like, that was bad. And we were just like, oh my God, like I cannot catch a break. So at this point, it's like, we just have to leave no doubt. And in order to do that, apparently it requires major surgery. So sometimes you got to do what you got to do. And obviously for anybody else listening or whatnot, not everybody wants to compete at this level and not everybody should. And not everybody has the resources to like, I have the best ortho in the world. Okay. Dr. Matthew Murray has treated me and really has not asked for $1 since I've started with him. So like, that is why I'm able to do this. So I just wanted, like, that's full disclaimer. Like I do have a very, very, very generous, wonderful orthopedic surgeon. So if you have that person in your life, like thank them like 10 times over. He knows how passionate I am about competing. Like he made this happen for me because I cannot afford a $30,000 shoulder reconstruction surgery. This is like the last ditch effort. This is, we are doing everything basically in our imagination to make lockouts and like medals a reality. If you are not dead set on like making an international team or like dead set on, competing at this level, training 6 days a week, going through physical therapy, like that's okay. There are other people with this condition where if they just stopped lifting overhead, they could pretty much live a comfortable, normal life, or like lifted lighter, right? Like they weren't lifting maximally. That was an option. I just didn't want to go that route. Like that's not something that I felt very passionately about. They're like, yeah, you could lift like 30%, you could snatch 30 kilos or clean and jerk 40 kilos for the rest of your life and be fine. Even living with these, injuries. And then maybe when I'm older, if I really want to get it done, I can get it done. So it was a choice. It wasn't, something where like I was rushed into the emergency room. So I really have no one to thank but myself for this, right? Because like I did it to myself.
Now, do you think this is or will change your approach to your athletes' injuries and how you kind of approach rehabbing or getting those diagnosed?
I'm pretty conservative. Like I have some, and this is it, like going back to, like I said, it's a great article. Catalyst wrote it forever ago about being a brick or a Twinkie. I have bricks and I have to watch them. Like I have to be super, super, super conservative with my bricks because my bricks won't say a peep. They can be dying and they won't tell you. Like you have to watch them because they will kill themselves before they tell you that, oh, my arm's broken. I haven't ever had an athlete though with an injury as severe as this. Like never. Or like I've never had anything like this happen. So sometimes I get a rap for not letting people lift heavier. Like that's just something where like we have a certain time and I'm very adamant about it, that we have gone through a lot of strength and conditioning, basically work leading up to, and strength and conditioning cycles leading up to our heavy block. If they do not do those cycles, my athletes will tell you I will make them redo them and redo them and redo them until they get through them. So I know that they're lifting successfully at like 60 to 70%. And then they're lifting successfully from 70 to 80%. And then maybe we're going to lift from 85 to maybe 90%. And then finally, in the last few weeks, we're going to do 90 to 100%. And they'll tell you this, like they get frustrated with me because I don't do random max out sessions at all. I get pissed. I get pissy with them. I'm like, if I see them, say going for a 5 rep max, right? And it's sketchy on rep 2, they'll hear me scream from across the gym, drop the fucking bar, drop it right this. And I lose my temper sometimes. I'm like, drop it right this second. You're going to get hurt. And sometimes, I coach a lot of men, so they get testy, but after they watch the video or we talk about it, like they understand why I'm doing it. Because I have been hurt and I have had coaches who like let me push it because I could, right? Like I was talented enough to do it. So they let me go heavier. It might not have been perfect. It may not have been even technically sound, but like, well, she can do it and go to nationals. So let's let her do it. I don't do that. Like we don't do that. And I hope they understand why. Like I don't want them to go through the same injuries that I've gone through. I don't want to be that coach who's like, yeah, you know what? It's fine. Go for it. Max out. And then the next thing you know, they're in a sling. Generally, I'm conservative. Now, I do have, and it's hard. Like you really have to get to know people. I do have Twinkies. I have straight up Twinkies, and I'm not going to say names. They know who they are. And they will come in and whine about every little freaking ache and pain. Every little freaking ache and pain. And those ones, I'm like, go pick up the bar. I'm not listening to it. Like, I'm not. Like, I'm sorry. You're fine. If they've been lifting 70, like, and really, these are more like, I hate to say it, but they're really like that intermediate level where they've been lifting long enough to where, like, they should be lifting heavier, but mentally, it's not there. I keep them there. And it's because it's mentally not there, right? We're at 70%. Oh, God, my shoulder's falling off and my legs are burning and my feet are aching. It's not like they're injured. It's just hard. Weightlifting is hard and they don't understand that, whether they're just like really good at other things in life and weightlifting is like the one thing they're not like excellent at. So like they get frustrated with it. That's kind of my definition of a Twinkie. It's like everything in life, you're very type A, you're very good at things, you're very successful. You come in here and you're average or below average because we do have some people who are really talented and like really good. And it's, oh yeah, you know what? Gonna back off a little bit on that 10 RM because, my hip, it's really, lit up. And I'm like, it's 50%. Like, what do you mean it's lit up? I'm like, did you stretch? Did you get a massage? Did you go in the sauna? Like, we have a sauna in our gym, right? Like, I'm like, what are you doing to take care of your hips? And I'll ask them, right? Nothing. They've done nothing, right? Oh, but my hip's achy. Those are people I'm like, okay, well, go warm up, go start that over again, go in the sauna, or, book an appointment with a massage therapist. We're getting back on track with in-house massage. I'm a big believer in sports massage. Leading up to the Arnold, leading up to AO, I'd get at least one massage a week. If they're not getting at least a massage a month and they're 40 years old trying to do weightlifting, I'm like, what are we doing? You know what I mean? It's like, you have to take care of your body. And I feel like in this culture, like American culture, things like massage, things like chiro, they're viewed as luxuries, and they're really not. They're necessities when you're a weightlifter. Those are my Twinkies who I'm like, you actually need, go talk to the chiropractor, or better yet, go see my ortho if we think there's a serious issue, right? And I stay in communication with my massage therapist that I recommend to everybody, my chiropractor who I recommend to everybody, and my ortho who I recommend to everybody. I've got 3 people, right? If I send my Twinkies and they come back and I text my doctor and I said, hey, is anything wrong with them? And they straight up go, no. That's how I know. Like, if I don't know for sure and it's like a persistent issue, then I ask a professional or multiple professionals. And then if we all agree that nothing is wrong and they're just adapting to weightlifting and it's hard, that's the discussion I have to have with the athlete. Now, I also have athletes who I send to the same doctors and something is wrong, like maybe they tweaked something, and the doctor has to tell them that something is wrong because they don't listen to me. Most of the time they do listen to me because they're going, but they don't want to hear it. It works both ways. I hate to say it, but it's usually masters athletes where like things just hurt a lot, and then they don't think that they need to take care of themselves, like things like massage, like they're not 20 anymore. Masters being as early as like mid 30s, early 40s. If they're not doing like double the amount of recovery work, or they're not sleeping enough, or they're not eating well, then yeah, things are going to hurt. And not everybody likes to hear that.
Yes.
You're not fix it with 20 minutes of mobility work. Like that's a fallacy. Like, that's just not real. Like, I hate to say it, but it's your lifestyle that you live,
So how would you approach that? Sorry, I have like, I get people come up to me and they say, well, my nutrition wasn't good, so that's why my session suffered, or I'm not sleeping well, that's why my session suffered. My question is, why aren't you doing those things? So how do you kind of address a situation like that to ensure that the bases are met, or the foundation is kind of laid, and then the extra recovery can kind of come in and just, be a Band-Aid for everything else?
Well, I think the question comes back to why, right? Like, and I will admit, I'm not the most sensitive coach. I can be sensitive, but I'm very logical, right? So if someone's coming to me and they're like, hey, my nutrition's not on point, my sleep's not on point, my training sucks because these things are not on point. Okay, great, noted. Why? Is training a priority right now? No. Okay, well then why? Why isn't training a priority right now? Well, I have 2 kids. One of them's been really sick. I'm having trouble at home. I'm having trouble in my job. So I'm not sleeping, and I'm not eating because I have no appetite because I'm stressed. Okay, so now we know why nutrition and sleep are not on point, right? So I'm a big believer in mental health. I'm a big believer in addressing mental health. That is not something as a coach you should be addressing unless you have a degree in mental health, or you're a psychiatrist, or you're a psychologist. We have an on staff, and I hate to say like on staff, but our third business partner is a psychiatrist. I also have a psychologist that we refer our clients to when these issues start to really affect training and affect their life. I don't think as a coach, I think it's important to acknowledge that this is going on. I think that it's important to recognize it, but I feel that too many weightlifting coaches become too involved in personal matters that don't really concern them. And it creates a lot of drama within the gym sometimes. And these are really issues that should be dealt with a mental health professional. I know that some people aren't going to agree with that. I know that some coaches try to do it all, but having 70 athletes, if I try to address the mental health issues of all of my clients, I'm not going to be a weightlifting coach anymore. Now I'm just a friend. Because like I said, I'm not a licensed professional. And so it's recognizing that, one, you have to understand why. Maybe they're a 19-year-old kid. Maybe they're just being a shithead. Sorry, but like maybe they're not eating or sleeping because they're drinking and partying, right? that also could have to do with a mental health issue, but it could just be that they goofed off because they just finished finals. So it's kind of finding that fine line, like, hey dude, how are you feeling? Like, why are we acting like this? Oh, I'm celebrating because I'm graduating college, or I'm really depressed because this is going on, right? And so I'm partying to make up for this void in my life. Or I'm not eating the right foods because I don't feel like myself. We all go through these phases. It's not like I'm immune to this. Like I said, when I was in a cast, I just ate food all the time and I got fat. Okay? It made me feel better. It made me like happy because I like food. And when I'm stressed, I don't eat. Like, that is why I lost so much weight. Straight up, like that's just my coping mechanism. I forget to eat. I just am not thinking about it. I'm not celebrating. I'm not enjoying foods that I like. So that's where my role stops. And then I refer out, just like an injury. It's the same thing. If you have an injury that you as a coach do not know how to handle, we all have rehab exercises that we fall back on, that we've learned from our PTs, our chiros, like things that we can pass along to our athletes. But if it's out of like your range of knowledge, or it's like, you're like, hey, this actually, I don't know what's going on with your shoulder, you should have someone look at this. It's important as a weightlifting coach to understand, like, it's not your fault that you're not a doctor. It's not your fault that, like, you're not a psychiatrist. And it's not your job to pretend to be one either. They're paying you for weightlifting coaching. And some people forget what that is. They forget that it's, your opinion on their lifting, not their life, not their diet, not their nutrition, unless they've hired you. Sure. Do all those pieces matter? And can you, if they ask your advice, can you give it? Absolutely. But is it necessarily your place? No. And I don't, I tell my athletes, like, I'm not really your friend, although we are friendly. I'm your coach. I don't like go out and drink with my athletes. Like, I'm not partying with my athletes. Like, I don't have that relationship with any of my athletes. And some of them, they don't get that actually. They think I'm maybe cold, maybe distant, but it comes down to being a professional. I I have my friends who I go out with on my own. You know what I mean? Like, I celebrate on my own. I tell, my roommate, for example, like if I'm having issues at work or whatnot, but I'm not telling my client. Or like if my client is having problems at home, that's not something that really should be discussed, maybe just momentarily in a training session. And from that point, it's like, hey, I think that you should really talk to this person that I trust, who I think who could really help you work through these issues that I see are affecting your training. That's how the conversation needs to look. I'm not a nutritionist. So if someone has a problem with their eating, one of my business partners does nutrition coaching. I refer them to her, or I refer them to someone else who does nutrition coaching. Again, that's not my specialty. So I'm not going to tell them how to eat. I'm not going to put together a diet for them. Like, that's not the area that I'm really focusing on. So even though that's a little bit of a vague answer, it's like, if you don't have all the answers, that's okay. But you have to have the resources available to your athletes so that you can get them back to training and back on track.
Sure. And I would like to kind of take that answer and go to the other side of it. So if we're in the gym and there's some sort of mental block for an athlete going up to a lift, a big lift, and I'm sure this is something you can kind of speak to. Mm-hmm. What's your approach to helping someone overcome like a fear of getting under a PR weight, or a fear of tugging on a bar that they're kind of scared of?
This is kind of loaded, right? So I don't put weights on an athlete's bar. Like, when I write programs, I give them every weight down to the kilo they're going to lift that day. I don't give them like general percentage work. Like, I write every single lift that they do. I don't give them weights I know they can't do. Straight up, I know. And it's one of those things that, like, you have to know your athletes well enough. I have like one athlete who freaks out over like moderate weight. I'm serious. Like, it's just one of those things. And with her, I go back down to a weight that she's confident at. I truly believe that if you have especially more than one athlete who is afraid to approach a bar, like straight up afraid, and they're not pulling it like they pulled the weight before. They've like abandoned all technique, all logic, and they're now just missing over and over and over again. We don't have that in my gym. I'm not making it up. You can ask any one of my athletes. I shut it down. After 3 misses on we're done. We are freaking done. We are not doing that weight. They're not ready for it. I've learned that the hard way. I think I've gotten under quite a few weights where maybe I wasn't ready to get under those weights. You know, like getting under 100, right? My elbow sublexed, like this was right before AO and on the way up. That's probably not a weight Colin would have loaded had he been on that meet. That was a weight that I loaded, right? Like I'm not excluded from this. I jumped from 92 to 100 and got under it, right? Like this is just me because this is just the kind of athlete I am. You could literally load it and everyone is screaming 100 in the crowd because I've just smoked 92. So I was like, fuck it, load 100. I was like, fuck it, let's go. Like nothing in between, 2-minute clock, load the damn bar. Like, let's go. Because like there's no fear. And that's what I teach. Like there's no fear. We load the bar and we go. Therefore, they have to trust me that I am picking a number because they have no fear that they're going to make it, or they're at least going to have a damn good shot at it. And that's trust. If they're constantly loading weight that they're scared to approach, you have not done your job as a coach. You're not doing it. You're not doing it right because you're not building the confidence or the base that they need to make that weight. I tell them you're not going to lift 101% unless you lift 99% the exact same way. It's going to happen. Like either you can lift 99% or you can lift 101%, but let's be real. We hold up a half kilo plate, right? I'm like, this is a donut. This is a freaking donut on each side of your bar. You're telling me you're snatching 120 and you can't do 121. I was like, I want you to think about how absurd that sounds, right? You just smoked 120. So we're going to do 120 until you are so blue in the face with 120, you look at me and you beg for 121. Or 122 or something else other than 120. And it's that consistency in that final block of training. They will hit the same number over and over and over and over until they look at me and they're like, why have I done 5 singles at 100? I'm like, you're going to do 5 more if you ask me one more time. I said, I'm like, you have to trust. You have to trust that we're going 100 and then we're going to do 103 and then we're going to do 106 and maybe for you 112 is a casual number, but I want to make sure that you can hit all these singles leading up to it just in case. What if we have to do a wave in the back? You know what I mean? Like what if the cards don't fall our way? Like we have to be in good enough shape at 80% to even think about 90%. And then we have to be in good enough shape. And this is the problem. I don't think enough coaches get their athletes in shape at 90%. And this is my experience working with like 5, 6, 7 different coaches. I've had 2 really good coaches at getting me in shape at 90%, Colin being the best, right? And I hit 90% 20 times before I even took 93% or 95%. So when I took 93%, I was like, thank God. Thank you. Thank you. Something different other than 90%. He had me triple 90% before I took like 93%, right? Like fucking triple, like hands stay on the bar, do 90% 3 times. That was the longest triple of my whole life, right? That was like 91 kilos. That was my best triple to date, right? And I remember staring at that thing like, he's a madman. Like he's straight up a madman, right? And I wasn't fearful when I took 98 kilos. I wasn't fearful when I took 100 kilos. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like in my head, I'm like, I've tripled 91 kilos. So why would I be afraid to pull on 100? Like, of course I'm not afraid. Like, you know, or like when Colin loads the bar, I'm going to pull it. He's watching me lift. He's watching me warm up. And so that just comes back to trusting your coach. So, and that's hard as a remote athlete, right? That's hard because you have to trust that we are watching your lifts. We may not be commenting on every video, but we can pick adequate numbers in the back. And unless you run your warm-ups in the back, like you run your whole gym, which like I run my gym, like I run my warm-ups in the back, there is no change. The intensity is the same. The warm-up is the same. We hit the same numbers we hit in training almost always because they've done so much volume. It's normally shorter and they're like, thank you, coach. Like they go out there and even if I load a PR, I'm like, you just smoked 3 kilos less in the back. Smoked it. So let's go pull this the exact same way. And it's timing. It's like giving them the right warm-up and giving them the right cycle and the right preparation so that there is no fear. If I have an athlete who's fearful, we go back to square one. I'm like, why are we afraid? What don't we understand about weightlifting that makes this a fearful experience? Or why do you feel pressured to lift this weight? Because clearly this isn't your max, because your max is a weight you lift successfully, right? It's not like this number we hit one time on a fluke. It's a number that you hit successfully. meaning you probably had very few misses leading up to it. It was a clean lift. It wasn't a Hail Mary. That's the number we're working off of.
So my question, I have a lot of questions. I have tons of questions, but for your on-site athletes, so say someone's lifting, and this kind of goes along the lines of like cues. They're lifting, you notice a technical fault that consistently reoccurs. Do you stop the programming and say, let's do this exercise that's going to cure that technical fault? Because you seem like you're pretty rigid when it comes to having a plan and following through that plan. How do you cure like technical problems that crop up from session to session?
It depends on the level of the athlete. Like if they're 2 weeks out from a major meet, like I had a kid who was like top 5 at the Arnold, right, from B session. I'm not going to mess with that fault 2 weeks out. I'm not. Like if I've done my job right, it shouldn't be that big of a technical fault to where he's missing lifts, right? Like if he was missing lifts, he'd be missing lifts like 6 weeks ago when we started our final block of preparation. So I would have caught it 6 weeks ago. If something is going on where my athletes start missing lifts 2 weeks out from a meet like that, and not like not the 2-day period where they're super beat up and I tell them they're going to miss some stuff, because I prep for that and we track that, and that happens every single cycle. This is like some fluke thing. The first thing I want to know is, did they sleep? Did they eat? And are they hurt? Like, cause like if it's some weird stuff I've never seen before, and like I know those athletes inside and out, and they don't perform like that. Like that doesn't happen. Like they straight up, there's a group of like 5 of them who train really, really intensely, and that doesn't happen. So if it's happening, I know something's wrong. Those are my bricks. Those are my people who want to go to seniors. They want to go to university nationals. They want to make an international team someday. They're like 19, 20, 22 years old, healthy, able-bodied men, right? That's an issue. Now, if it's someone else, right, who is like more of an advanced beginner, and we're 2 weeks out from a meet, or an intermediate lifter, then yeah, we're shutting it down. We're shutting it down. We are starting over. We're like, hey, something's off. And it's honestly just lack of experience, right? Like they go into the first time I give them like a heavy block of preparation, it's a small train wreck in the sense that they're so beat up from their heavy Monday that if I don't give them light enough work in between, Monday and Friday could just be a total disaster, because those are my people who are like 30 and have full-time jobs and like don't always prioritize recovery, and they also are trying to learn weightlifting. I offer a lot of private one-on-one coaching. That's like the majority of my business. That's why I have athletes coming to my house. And that's where we address those issues. I don't tear an athlete's technique apart during like a team practice. First of all, it can be really humiliating to do that to somebody. And I've learned my lesson that way the hard way. I've like lost athletes over that. And so that's not something really I regret. It's just like not everyone mentally can handle having their technique torn apart in a large group setting. Like we have a group now who's very close knit, but there's always like a newer lifter, right? And I've learned that my business partner is way better at handling like brand new lifters, even those who are strong or talented, because they're not totally accustomed to how I coach. And they know they're doing it wrong because they can see my face from across the room and they're starting to get to know me, and like they know it's wrong and they get frustrated. And they're like, I know I need to do a one-on-one session. And that's just our culture. Like we have the culture of taking the step back and working one-on-one in more of a private setting. They just look at me and I'll say, my cue is let's take 10% off. Let's go down 15%, or let's add another variation to address whatever issue's going on. Maybe it's a pause. Maybe it's a tempo. Maybe it's a deficit, right? Maybe I add a pull. Maybe I add a snatch deadlift to hip. We see a lot of issues with snatch. Although, honestly, I correct cleans more than anything else because I just don't know what's going on, but there's not a lot of, you go to a seminar and they spend like 2 hours on snatch and like 30 minutes on clean, right? I correct more cleans than anything else. They know that something's wrong. And that's just from day one. Like we start every single athlete who starts with me, the first private, I tell them it's a snatch private, and they straight up don't snatch. Like they get so pissed because I trick them. And I'm like, okay, like let's lie down on the floor. And they're like, what? I'm like, lie down on the floor. And they're like, okay. So they're lying down on the floor. I'm like, I want you to tell me what you feel. And they're like, and it's weird. Like you get like a whole range of emotions and you really start to get to know people this way. Like I've had someone be like, I feel anxious, but like, I'm okay. I'm going to like just get through this the best way I can. And then I have someone like, I feel, my right shoulder is pressing more into the platform than my left shoulder. And then my right hip is slightly elevated. Like it varies. It varies a lot. Like when you ask people what they feel, but you get to know that person like instantly. Like my ones who are super emotional, I cannot be hard on them. I can't. If they straight up start talking about their feelings when I ask them what they feel lying on the ground, I know they're not immediately going to be like an athlete, right? Whereas my athletes lie down and they're naming every body part, how it feels that day, what's ready to go, what's not ready to go. Like maybe they played sports, maybe they was just recreational sports, maybe they're physical therapists. Like they've got some sort of background where they're really in tune with their own body. Those are the ones who I can push a little harder because they have that awareness, which really you have to develop as a coach. And that's what it all comes down to. It comes down to awareness. My intermediate lifters are intermediate, not because they don't know how to snatch, not because they don't know how to clean and jerk, but because they're not totally in tune with their body and they cannot always execute how they want to execute. It's not there yet. Therefore, they don't need to be lifting super heavy all the time. They need to be doing moderate to light weights and focusing on technique and really getting into tune with their own body. How far can I push it? How far will my coach let me push it? Like there's a certain level and a certain awareness that when you see someone lift or you talk to them about a certain lift, you just know. I think that's a gift. I think that you learn to feel people out and you quickly learn who needs to go back to square one and do breathing exercises on the ground for 30 minutes until they can actually breathe properly and like actually stabilize their spine. We're not even touching a barbell. We're just breathing on the ground. And then I have them stand up on their feet. And then we start talking about feet for like an hour. And I might sound crazy, except foot pressure is huge in this sport and it's really underrated. And like not a lot of coaches talk about it. Colin talks about it, although I wish he would talk more about it because he's brilliant. But like foot pressure is one of those big things. I'm like, so what are your feet doing today? And they're like, they're attached. I'm like, okay, so we have no awareness what's going on in our feet. We're not going to lift successfully. Foot pressure is everything. Like when we're talking about midline stability, when we're talking about setup, when we're talking about stance, if they don't even know where their feet are under their body or they don't have the dexterity in their toes to grip a platform or kind of root in, they can't separate the front of their foot from the back or the inside of their foot, the medial side, from the outside of their foot. It's a sign that they're not ready to freaking go push heavy through a cycle. They may want to, like they may mentally be there, but physically it's not there. And it's basically getting them to a point where mentally and physically they're aligned. That's it. And you have to know that by working with them in a setting that allows you to do that. So if you're just coaching these huge weightlifting classes and you can't have those conversations or take that time to do it, I know some coaches who, older coaches actually, and like this is kind of an infuriating topic, right? Like I have a degree in exercise physiology. I've worked my ass off. I have half my master's. I have years of experience, even though they have many more years of experience. They're like, they shouldn't be paying for your weightlifting coaching. I've heard this before. I've heard like very advanced coaches, that like, if you're a younger coach, you shouldn't be charging. That's like my favorite thing to argue. Like if I'm taking 3 hours out of my day to bring like my background into the picture, to talk about your body, to give you referrals with all of my connections that I have made, to even get you to start thinking about where your body is in space, you're doing the very best job you can, and you're taking the necessary steps to develop weightlifters, okay? You're doing a good job, okay? You should be charging for that. Now, what you shouldn't be charging for, like I said, like if I just ran like huge weightlifting classes and I was like, oh yeah, like pull longer, stand up, jump. Like, yeah, of course. Like, I get that. But like, I don't want people to get discouraged out there. If you have like 5 lifters and you know that you're doing everything you can with the knowledge you have to make them better, like charge for that. Like honestly, like seriously, like people will respect you for that. I started off personal training and like when I first started, some people would look at me really funny when I was like, hey, we're going to do breathing exercises today. And then a year later, they like understand how to stabilize their spine before they go under a squat, right? Or like before they set up for a snatch, and they're like, you know what? Thank you. Like those are like the little things that like if you're listening to this, you're like, wow, that sounds like that's going to take a lot of time. Yeah, it takes a lot of time, which is why I have a good group of clients I work with for 90 minutes every single week, one-on-one. And that's how I'm able to do this. Like there is a market for it. people really do want to learn how to move well. And because they're learning how to move well, they learn how to lift successfully. But it's not something that you can rush. And, Sean Waxman, he's a brilliant coach. I did my level 2 with him. One of the best things he ever told me, he's like, you're not going to know you're any good at this sport until you're like 4 to 6 years deep. And that's if you have no injuries. He's like, seriously, he's like, no one is going to be good at this until you're 4 to 6. He's like, give me 4 to 6 years. I think the best thing he ever said was, so he's like, I'll tell people to get, kind of like I do breathing exercises. Sean will be like, get down and start doing push-ups. And he'll just wait until they stop. You know what I mean? Like they might do like 10. And he's like, okay, Twinkie. Okay. They might do 100, right? And they're just going and going because he hasn't said stop. Right? Sorry, my dog is. Oh, you bad dog. Hold on one second. Let's pause this right here. He literally got a shoe. Papa. No. No. We are not chewing these shoes. I just have to show you this because I think you'll think it's funny. Do you see this purse?
Yeah.
Okay, this is more than I make in a month. Okay, my dog was chewing on this freaking purse. I have a client over. She's in the garage. No! Like, gee, this is why I'm freaking out. Sorry.
No,
I was like, I saw them in the bag, and I was like, she just got that for Mother's Day. Like, don't do it. Yeah, so getting back on track, yeah, Sean will just have them do push-ups. And he's like, that's the first test that I give them because it tells you a lot about their mentality when it comes to training. And like, I'm not at Sean's level, so I'm not going to like say drop down and give me push-ups. You know what I mean? But like that breathing exercise is not something where it's like physically abusive or anything. It just tells me a lot about their mentality going into training. So there has to be some sort of system like in your training protocol where you screen people. I also sit down with every new athlete, or Brittany will sit down with every new athlete. Like we do not allow drop-ins. We don't do trial sessions. We sit down for an hour and that's your trial session and we talk. And we make sure that it's a good fit. We have team standards. We go through the team standards. They're pretty extensive. We expect a certain level of maturity. So I do coach some kids, but I don't coach a lot. My focus is really on like those teenagers and up, up to masters. And so I don't really have a coach yet who has that level of patience or that level of experience to like instill that maturity that I want in my youth lifters. You know what I mean? Like I don't want it to be a daycare center or a free for all. Although I'm open, like I have youth lifters, we just don't have a lot of them. They're just very like mature, older youth lifters. Because they train with our adults. We don't have like a special training group for beginners. We don't have a special training group for advanced lifters. All of our lifters train together. So even going back to day one, the first time they walk in the gym and we sit down and I'm like, hey, what are your goals? If their goals aren't to lift super heavy, okay, maybe they just want to compete in local meets because that is like a requirement that I have at my gym is that they have to do at least 2 local meets a year on our meet schedule. That's fine. But I'm not going to put them through a super intensive, like heavy prep until maybe year 3. Maybe we have a discussion about it in a private session. I'm like, hey, I think you're ready. And I think that too many people are pushed too fast. And not everyone likes to hear that. So on day 1, I straight up tell them, like, look, you may not be good at this for 4 to 6 years. I'm serious. And no one likes to hear that, right? But some people really appreciate the honesty.
Yeah, I think I know I can kind of relate, but I'm sure most people on their first day in the sport, they want to jump in and do stuff that people 6 years down the line are doing, like train twice a day, squat to max, do all this crazy shit because it sounds really sexy. But in reality, like progress is sexy, not the program.
It is. And, I've started people from like ground zero. I had a guy who came to try weightlifting for free day last year, and I'm like a big fan of that program through USAW. And he literally showed up in like a baseball hat, like total dad, like kind of like he's younger, but he looked like a total dad. He's like, yeah, I'm kind of a dabbler, I'm just here to check out weightlifting. And I'm like, oh geez, right? Like this will be interesting. He jumps in, and I'm not even kidding. That was immediately someone I'm like, we got to pump the brakes. Because he was ready to like train twice a day, be in, and I'm like, he hadn't even really done CrossFit or strength work at all. Like he was like running and doing like, you know, he's in the Air Force, he's doing like PT, but he had no background with snatch or clean and jerk. I'm like, we have to pump the brakes. And I mean, this very large adult man snatched 20 kilos for a long time. Like, and before that, he snatched 10 kilos with like a trainer bar, like collar to collar, right? And of course, like not every man, not every woman is ready to take that step back, right? Like they have an ego about it. And so I don't deal with that. I don't deal with that shit. Like that is a no-go for me. I'm like, if you're not willing to take a step back, and honest to God, I will actually, there's another side of the story, which I'll get into because it actually is very relevant. If they're not willing to take a step back, one, that's a no-go. Mentally, they've got to work on some things, and that's what the conversation looks like. Hey, here's what's going on. I don't feel like this is the right fit. I don't feel like maybe this is the right team. There are other teams in the area, and I even tell them that there are other teams in the area that will probably let you go heavier. You might be happier there. You may just enjoy it more. I can't promise you will be successful. I can't promise you won't get hurt because you don't move well. But I can say you might be happier. And that's what I would tell them. Just straight up like, hey, it's a mutual breakup. Maybe it's not mutual. Maybe it's one-sided. But that's what I would do in that situation. The other side of the coin, and this is something probably not a lot of coaches deal with, but it's just as important. There are some people who don't want to progress at all. Like, you know how you say progress is sexy? Okay. I had a CrossFit gym owner come to me for weightlifting coaching, and like I did not really get the full disclaimer or really realize how this person came into being a CrossFit gym owner. It was kind of one of those things where I found out more on later, but I realized very early on they were very inexperienced. So in my head, they're going to work with a trainer bar for like 4 weeks, and then we're going to move on to maybe a 15 kilo bar, maybe work our way up to 20 kilo. You know what I mean? Like just like slowly integrate them. They were kind of more like on the business side. These are things I'm learning. Straight up, didn't want to snatch more than 7 kilos. And I'm like, finally I sat down, and I'm a very passionate person, and I'm like, this is not working. Like progress is sexy, and we're at week 8.